Hello everyone, let me start by saying this. You know, we have come a long way as a society and we have seen a lot of change within our world, and this is on every level. Communities have changed, genders have changed, the way we looked at race, religion, culture, borders, all these have changed. One might say humanities have changed. So when Africans were trying to work to gain independence, or when a black man was fighting for his freedom, one of the first countries to get independence in Africa was Ghana. If I can start by saying that one of the quotes that the former president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, said was that Ghana independence will be meaningless unless Africa was independent. This man was one among the first men who fought to see the liberation of Africa from the imperialists. And what he meant by this quote is just to say that in order for Ghana to gain the freedom that they were looking for, this would be meaningless unless the whole Africa had this similar freedom. Kwame Nkrumah and the other men who were fighting to see the independence of Africa or their countries knew that they were facing one of the biggest challenge of their time, and to face a very strong opponent, you have to reunite. If you have small forces, you have to come together. But the reality is that many African countries have suffered because each country often try to go on its own. They do not try to follow the example of many other superpowers or many organizations around the world. Even the most powerful country on earth today, the United States of America, whenever they go somewhere, they look for allies. Even if they are going to a battle against a very small country, they always look at least another country on board. This is not because they cannot defend themselves. It's because they need to be somewhere where other countries are supporting them. And in times of when things go wrong, in terms of the law, of course, or holding one accountable, then at least they have a defense somewhere else. But these, we are talking about small and the poorest countries on earth, but they always try to go on their own. And this has been the mentality of many black people around the world, where they do not want to come together. Yes, there is a colonial root that took a place that I've always said poisoned many black people. To these days, see other podcasts that we have produced. We have spoken about this in terms of a black man. So coming together is one of the biggest things that you can ever imagine. In this sense, anyone who have tried to divide the black people or Africans have often used the same method, to use another black man, to use another African country to make the life of the other African or the other black man miserable, so that other black man or African will be held accountable, while those who are pushing the buttons are behind. And one of the most stupidity thing is that a black man, even for all these years, or African countries, they have not learned this. I mean, even other countries in other parts of the world, this is how the divisions have been made, using religion, using tribes, using ethnicity, using different forms of ideology or ways that one group look different to the other. It's like if you are trying to make two people fight, what you do is you go on this side, you talk to this one, you speak to that person and say, look at what this person is talking about you, or look at what this person is doing. He think he's better than you. You know, he has been talking about you behind your back. He has been disrespecting you. You need to fight for your position. You need to fight for your place. You have to prove everybody that you are innocent, or you have to prove that you are stronger than that person. You have to prove that you can't be bullied, or you can't be controlled by this person or by this group. And this method has been used many times, where different groups will fight, and the reason in front of them will be because of religion, or will be because of their ethnicity, because of their culture, because of their traditions, because of their their history, because of their skin color. All these have been used as a weapon to divide people, and people have not learned. Today again, we are looking at something similar. So today we are once again on Africa continent, and our topic of today is to actually discuss whether Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, is a blessing to Rwanda and Congo or a curse to these two countries. This might also apply to the region, to the Africa continent, and so on. This is a wonderful topic because you have heard the history of Rwanda, how tricky it is. You have known Paul Kagame for a while, a man who came in power 30 years ago, whom some see as a hero, others see as a terrible man, where some people have gone even too far to describe him as the Hitler of Africa. While on the other hand, you have seen the history of the Congo or DRC, a country that has gone from some of the most difficulties times that you can ever think of on earth. People had their hand chopped. The darkest colonial or brutal colonial ever take place was in this country. And after that, Congo have seen so many conflicts and wars. To these days, we are talking about the same thing. The DRC have lost millions of people since 1996. More than 6 million have been displaced out of the country, probably more than that also within the country. Today, again, when you look in the media, the issue of Congo is there again, while Rwanda is always implicated. This is why today we choose to talk about this particular issue, because there have been so many stories and history being told, and every person or different people will come with different story to tell about the problem of these two countries. But today, since we are a school of common sense, we are going to actually unpack, tell you or speak to you directly about some of the truth that you should know that hide within these two countries. No political, no feelings attached, nothing attached to it, but just to tell you what you don't get told. Hello, welcome to Andunda Tree. My name is Balozi, and I am so pleased that you have taken some other time to follow me on this podcast. Before we dive into our topic of today, if you are new here, I just want to say welcome. You are in a very wonderful place. You are in a place where we discuss matter that are not discussed or are discussed, but are discussed in a different ways, in a sense where the truth or the reality is hidden or is ignored because of interests, because of feelings, because of different reasons. Here at Andunda Tree, we are a platform that aims to educate people about common sense and wisdom on the matters that take part in our society, things that you don't sometimes think about often, but matter, or you heard a story about something, but the reality is hidden behind. This is what we do here if you are new. But if you have been here before, you already know what we do here, what we discuss here, how we exchange thoughts on this podcast. In that case, I wish to say welcome back. We are at the time where the world is failing to tackle even some of the most simplest challenges because of this idea of interest, because of this idea of partnership, because of this idea of allies, because of these greedy, where each individual or each country or each group see their interests first. We are more likely to even give up what we used to stand for or what we can stand for just because of this thing. And as you have seen, the suffering of Congolese for many years, but people continue to tell these stories differently. On the other hand, we have seen the suffering of Rwandese people or people in Rwanda, but the stories will be told differently. So this topic matters not only to Congolese, not only to Rwandese, but to the neighboring countries, the region, but also to African country. However, most importantly, also to the world, because these two countries hold a history of the world. What they possess means a lot to the world. This is why a story of Rwanda and DRC is very important. You cannot tell the story of Rwanda without talking about the DRC. Today, you cannot tell a story of the DRC without mentioning Rwanda. One of the reasons why this story is very important is because it involves the region people, it involves the African countries, it involves the countries of the world, including some of the most powerful countries on earth. And within these, there is also certain resources that the world need and they use every day. Some people say the story of the Congo is very complicated, or the conflict that you see in the DRC is very complicated. But on this podcast, you come to understand that these stories are not complicated. People just choose to tell them the way they want to tell them. Like I said, today we are going to look at whether the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, is a blessing or is a curse to these two nations. Now, in order to come to a conclusion of this topic, we will briefly first look at the history of these two nations. So we will look at the history of Rwanda and how Paul Kagame came to power, and we will look briefly at the history of the DRC, and then we will look at what linked them together. Once we look at that, we will then focus on Paul Kagame, because the Rwanda we are talking about, or we are mostly going to focus on, is the Rwanda of Paul Kagame. Why the Rwanda of Paul Kagame? Because he has been in power for more than 30 years. He's the only president somebody at my age have known as the president of Rwanda. And his coming has brought a different face of these two nations. This is why this is important. This is why we'll talk about how we came to power. Once we look at this brief history, we are going to look at some of the good things that President Paul Kagame has brought and some of his critics. The good, it can mean the positive that people say about him or what he says about himself. And the bad, on the other hand, will be about critics or what other people say about him that may look negative. After, we will then come to look at what brings some of the conflict between the DRC and the Rwanda, and then provide a conclusion of what we think about the whole situation. Why, whenever you're talking about the conflict of DRC or what is going on in the DRC, the killing, the raping, why Rwanda is always involved, or why Rwanda is always being mentioned, why they always mention Paul Kagame. He always says this as well in his speech. He says this, why Rwanda? When the DRC is surrounded by 9 other countries, or share borders with other 9 countries. Why Rwanda? You know, for those who follow football, there's a footballer, Mario Balotelli, who, you know, after going through different episodes of him being talked about in the media, one day he celebrated a goal when he scored, and he put at the back of his t-shirt, said, why is always me? And that is very important. Why was always Balotelli? Some people, I'm sure, have got the answers or helped Balotelli to find the answers, because whatever was being published in the media, Balotelli did this, Balotelli did that. He saw himself as if media and the people were against him. I just remember that story. This is what we usually see with Rwanda of Mr. Paul Kagame himself when it comes to the story of the DRC. How we often say, why is always Rwanda, 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 Rwanda in the story of the DRC? The DRC problem is a DRC problem. Why Rwanda? We will answer that question as well today. So after looking the good and critics of Paul Kagame, we will then touch some of these points to raise questions. Why people say this, or why this was done. This is how we are going to analyze this topic. And you will see, we will get deep into some of the things that you don't often think about when you hear about these issues. A lot of conflict and a lot of problems go here after here without being resolved, because, like I said to you, the way people choose to resolve the problem, and when a story is being told, you have to also think about who's telling the story. As the world moves forward, these two countries don't seem to move forward, because you cannot move forward by just improving the economy. You move forward by developing the life and way of living of the people, improving their education, improving their freedom, promoting leaders, having an open society where everybody's welcome. And when Kwame Nkrumah was talking about this idea of Ghana freedom being based on the whole Africa, he had this idea of Pan-Africanism, which sees the development of Africans and other black men and women around the world to be seen not in a particular group, but to the development of all of them. I do believe by the end of this subject, your way of thinking on this issue will not be the same unless you are just driven by your emotions or by your interests. Before we start, I just want to say, when you face a challenge or an issue, you have to remove yourself from feelings. It means that you have to empty your mind or the way you think and listen first. Don't jump to a conclusion. Don't think what I am going to say before you even hear what I am going to say. That will mislead you. Focus on me word by word. Listen, whether you have the love of Congo, whether you have the love of Rwanda, whether you have the love of Kagame, whether you have the love of other groups or other individual people we might mention in this video, put your feelings aside. This is how an open-minded person deal with the challenges or deal with any form of problem. And I mean every problem. When you are dealing with a problem, particularly a problem that where you don't want to be touched, you have to train yourself to remove yourself out of the feelings, particularly in order to understand the situation. That is what will help you to have a better conclusion. Who is going to benefit from this conversation? Well, the Congolese will benefit from this conversation. Rwandese in particular will benefit from this conversation. People of the region, meaning that the other countries around Rwanda and the DRC will benefit from this conversation. The whole Africa will benefit from this conversation, because anything that is happening in one country in a particular continent can have an impact on the whole continent. And the world will benefit from this conversation, particularly those who support or bring issues into these countries or who take a part into bringing issues within these countries. And you yourself as an ordinary citizen who might wish to visit these countries, who use some of the devices that we use that are produced by the resources coming from these countries, this will be interesting to you. Even also those who watch football, who have come across the promotion of a visit to Rwanda as well, will be able to have a picture and benefit from this. So between these two countries, I am going to start with a brief history of the DRC. The DRC is a very large country in Central Africa. It's the second largest country in terms of the size after Algeria. It was the third, but after Sudan split, it became the second. It has got today more than 100 million of the population. It's a country with a lot of mineral resources that the world need, such as coltan, cobalt, diamond, you name it, that help the world to make some important devices that we use, such as the plane, the laptops, the mobile, and so on. You have heard all this before. The DRC has also the largest forest in the world today. It was after the Amazon, but now, because Amazon lost some of its forests, about 17%, the DRC have taken over. And there's so many other beautiful things that you hear about the Congo. To differentiate this, there are two Congos. Congo, the DRC, that's this story is focusing on, and the other Congo. The other Congo is referred sometimes as Congo-Brazzaville, which is the capital, and then this Congo we are talking about is Congo-Kinshasa, which is also the capital, or the DRC, or the Republic Democratic of Congo, which was also known as Zaire. These are the differences. So I'm sure you know which Congo now we are talking about. The DRC was colonized by the King of Belgium, Leopold II. When I say colonize the country, it means he took the country and they used it as his own. He used all the resources of the country in a way that he wished. But when the colonizer were dividing the countries, they decided that country was too good for one man to have. So after a lot of pressure, the country country was given to Belgium. So it means that the Congo was colonized by a monarchy instead of Belgium. But after that came to be known as a country that was colonized by Belgium. Like I mentioned, during colonial time, Congo lost more than 10 millions of its population through the brutal colonial of this man. And then after the independence in 1960, Congo had its first president, which was Joseph Kasavubu. And then Mobutu took over, a prime minister who was very powerful, who was fighting for the Congo and who also didn't want to serve the Westerners. He was trying to switch his country toward the Russia of the time. And he was brutally assassinated, where his body was cut in pieces and was burned. Very brutal. Mobutu took power and he was in power for 32 years. He was one of the biggest dictators in Africa. Everything belonged to him in the country. Under the support, of course, he was supported by superpowers such as the US and France, Belgium. All these superpowers were behind him. And he lasted in power for all these years because he had their support. This is according to the sources around the Congolese people did not have the say. He changed the country to Zaire, and like I said, everything belonged to him. He ran the country accordingly to how he wanted. And just like any other dictator, he made sure he controlled almost everything. The country was left under poverty for many years, and to the point where a war conducted by Rwanda and Uganda, also under the support of the same superpower, Mobutu was able to leave the country and then died in Morocco with sickness as the country was taken over by these two countries. And then after Mobutu, Laurent Desire Kabila decided to proclaim himself a president because the mission was to use a Congolese citizen to lead the war. So then as soon as they take the power, Rwanda and Uganda will decide who was going to lead the country, which of course was going to be a Rwandese person. But when this man realized this or recognized this, he accepted, just like any other politicians, he accepted everything at the time, including giving a part of Congo, Kivu, to the Rwandese or to the group, because Rwanda was not alone. It was not just Uganda. There were other countries behind, surrounding them. So when this man refused to this agreement that he was already signed, of course, he was assassinated. Perhaps you have also heard about that. Before he was assassinated, a war in 1998 broke out. The war of 1998 in the DRC ended without Rwanda and its allies succeeding. Therefore, Laurent Desire Kabila stayed in power and he was able to tell the Rwandese and other foreign forces to leave the country and to go back home to their countries of origin. These made many allies angry, particularly the Rwandese and Ugandans at the time, then led to the killing or the assassination of Laurent Desire Kabila in 2001. After the assassination of Laurent Desire Kabila, Joseph Kabila was placed to lead the country forward. Joseph Kabila was a young soldier at the time, and because he was inexperienced, he was seen as somebody who can be so easy to manipulate, so easy to use. After trying to use a Congolese, which was Laurent Desire Kabila, but then refused to give the country to those he came with, such as Rwanda, Uganda, and their allies, Joseph Kabila, who is believed to be a Rwandaphone, and many Congolese do not believe him to be the biological son of Laurent Desire Kabila, including some Western politicians and scholars who have come forward to testify, to say how they actually looked for Joseph Kabila and placed him on top of the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo as the president. And he was put in power to be controlled. He was used as a puppet. And while he was in power, Rwanda and the other countries controlled the DRC, had a say on the country. Their men and the women were placed on top of different institutions in the country, and they control different territory, different institutions within the country. Joseph Kabila himself, or Joseph Kanambe, became himself one of the richest men in Africa because he opened the country to everybody to serve themselves, and everybody served themselves. Countries, individual men within the Congo, many politicians did not care about serving people. They stole government money day in, day out. Corruption was at the highest level. And according to the source, one of the reasons of this was a master plan that was done in order to make sure that Congo stay as a very very disorganized country all the time in order for these people to save themselves. When I say these people, I mean everyone who was behind this change of the government of Rwanda and Uganda, of course, the Western power who supported this idea, and those puppet Congolese within the country. So Congolese were very distracted. There were things that were put in place to distract Congolese. Institutions such as education was broken, and the music was promoted, ideally to make Congolese love music to the point where they forget to focus on politics or to think further. I call it a master plan, because that's how it was done deliberately. As this happening, other neighboring countries were building their nations, including on the wealth of the DRC. And whenever Joseph Kabila was about to come out of the power, terrorist group will be formed somewhere and conflict will start, which killed many people, displaced people, raped women day in, day out. Congo became one of the most dangerous places to be a woman, but at the same time to be a child, because the children were also used as a child soldier and used in some of the most difficult work in the minerals. One of the most dangerous places to be a woman, because women were raped by terrorists day in, day out, where a woman was able to be raped more than 20 times by different men. You have perhaps heard all these stories, and I am not going to get deep into this because this is not the focus of this conversation. But if you look some of these stories, they are very deep. I remember Denis Mukwege was given a Nobel Prize. This was a doctor who was treating these women. So the international community knows deep about this story. They recognize this man for the hard work he did. And I referred to these people as a terrorist differently from what some people refer to them as rebels, because you know the difference. Rebel group politically is a group within the country that push an idea to take over the government with the idea of control government, or to be also involved within the government. While the terrorists on the other side, their agenda is to terrorize people, kill people, rape people, threaten people, make the government pay the price, and if they can't, take over the government. You see the difference? A rebel, the focus is on the government or the control of power. But a terrorist is somebody who is there to kill, to rape, to terrorize, to bring fear. So when you address or you call some of these groups in the DRC as rebel groups, you already lose the meaning of what you are trying to talk about. Because an ordinary rebel group do not often rape or kill people to a high level, such as the way the so-called M23 has done in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Yes, they can rape few people, they can kill few people, but not on a scale level this was done. So after different army groups were formed within the DRC, remember what I just said, the idea is to make sure this place is not managed well. It can remain within the conflict, disorder, so that the only story people will come to know is the rape, is a poor country, they don't get along, they kill each other, just like other places that you have already know on earth where these things have been done. And if they have a chance, divide this country into pieces so that it's easy to control, because as you know, the idea of dividing countries, when a country becomes very small, it becomes so difficult for that country to be independent. It now depends on other nations or other powers, such as the way you see the South Sudan and Sudan decided to divide themselves. The power they had was reduced. To these days, Sudan will remain one of the most places where conflict is hard to be seen to go away from these countries. There was a terrorist group that came out in 2012 around, which was called by the name of M23. Remember what I'm saying? I'm referring to terrorist group, not rebel group. Call themselves a rebel group, of course, and during this conversation, you will understand why. So when this group came, the idea was that this group were fighting because they are the citizen of the Congo by the name of Banyamulenge. I will tell you what this means or how this Banyamulenge came to be about when I will tell you about the history of Rwanda. So they stood up, picked guns, and at some point in 2012, they were able to take over one of the biggest city in the DRC by the name of Goma. Between them and the government, as you know, this was Joseph Kabila who was in power at the time. And when he was about to come out of the power again, the glass was shaken because even at the time, he didn't want to leave the power. After being in power for 18 years, he was forced to leave the government by other form of force behind. The city they took over of Goma, they abandoned it. There was international pressure that led them to abandon the city, and some of them left the country. They crossed the borders, went to Uganda, according to the source, and stayed in camps. This was around 2013. And then in 2022, a group that was eliminated, that put guns down, where many ended in other countries. Some took a position in the government and so on. Sadly, was a work again, 2022. After the country was under a different president, since then, there have been conflict, people being killed, to what you are seeing today, where they are trying to take again over the seat of Goma, the seat of Bukavu, because when Tshisekedi came in power, disagree with all these demands that were put in place, that they should give up their land. So that's the brief history of the Congo. Something else important that I should mention, the DRC have more than 400 tribes within the country. There are more than 200 languages, and the DRC share tribes with almost every country they share border with. For example, there is a Babembe in DRC as a tribe. There is a Babembe in Tanzania. There is Babemba in the DRC. There is Babemba in Zambia. There is a Nandes in the DRC. There is Nandes of Uganda. You see how the list goes on? There is the Batwa or the Twa people in Burundi, Rwanda, but also the DRC. And then it goes on to Angola, to Congo, Brazzaville. These are tribes, right? Rwanda, on the other hand, can be seen as a very small country in East Africa, a small country in terms of the size, share the borders with Uganda, DRC, Tanzania, and so on. Rwanda has the population of about 14.5 million. Among this population, there are 3 ethnicities. Among them, you have the Hutu, who compose about 85% of the population. You also have the Tutsi, who are about 14% of the population. And then you have the Twa or the Batwa, who are about 1% of the population. Most people speak Kinyarwanda or Rwandese language, but you also have people who speak Swahili and English. What's the difference? The difference is not like the tribes in the DRC where they have different languages, different cultures and traditions. And another difference that the people in Rwanda have is the look. Tutsi are more likely to be tall and slim. Hutu, on the other hand, are short, and then the Twa can be seen as the indigenous. They are almost like the Hutu, or another thing, you can look at the Hutus or Batwa or Twa as a Bantu, and then the Tutsi as the Nilotic. Historically, the ethnicities of Rwanda have had several conflicts within their country, particularly between the Hutu and the Tutsi. What usually or used to always happen was that whenever the Tutsi take power, they will control the country. Some of the Hutus will become refugees and run into neighboring countries, and those who will stay in the country will be controlled by the Tutsi. Almost everything will be controlled by Tutsi. And when the Hutu take power, it will be the other way around. The Twa usually depend which side individually they are supporting. If they are supporting the Hutus and the Hutus are affected, then those Twa also will be affected. If a particular group of the Twa are supporting the Tutsi and the Tutsi have been affected, then in that sense, that group of the Twa will be affected along with the Tutsi. Rwanda was colonized by Belgium, but it was colonized by Germany before that. In 1994, Rwanda experienced a tragic event that saw about 80,000 of people killed. This came to be known as the Genocide of Rwanda, where Hutus, Tutsi, and the Twa killed each other. But according to the data, the majority of the people who were killed were Tutsi. And during the genocide that took place within a couple of days, this created a massive movement of refugees that saw many Hutus run away from the country, where the majority of the people ran into the DRC. This in particular is the history of Rwanda, but now I will take you back to show you the link between the DRC and Rwanda. So during the years of 1930s, Belgium started to encourage Rwandese to go in the DRC to do some work. They were working there, and whenever there was a conflict in Rwanda, this often created a massive movement of refugees into neighboring countries, including the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Around the 1960s, Rwanda had its independence from Belgium. Now, just like I said, in Congo, for instance, you had several groups of Rwandese in the country. First, you had a very small group on the border with Rwanda, and then you had those who were coming from Rwanda, encouraged by Belgium around 1940 to come and do some labor work. In 1950s, you also had groups of refugees coming from Rwanda due to conflict in Rwanda, and then the refugees that came into the DRC during Rwanda's genocide in 1994. So these movements of Rwandese that were taking place in and out of the country made it difficult for the Congolese to know or to differentiate them. Now you may ask yourself, why the Rwandese that were in the DRC for a very long time were not considered as Congolese? One of the reasons was that because they were not known to be Congolese by the Congolese themselves and Belgium. The Congolese knew they were Rwandese. Secondly, because the citizenship, if you can go back to colonial, was based on the ownership of the land. It means that every group, every tribe, every ethnicity often had its place of habitat. Just like in many other countries around Africa, you have different tribes that live in different area, in a different city, in different community. In this sense, the Rwandese, or those who spoke in Rwanda, who came to the DRC or who were around the borders, did not own the land. They did not have the city they can call their own. They lived many years as a community. Yes, of course, they had to build the houses. They had the land to do their crops. It's not like they were in the camps and so on. Although within this event, there were also camps where many Rwandese were. But we are talking about those who have lived there for many years. They were also not included into the tribes of the countries. Remember what I said, Congo have more than 400 tribes. As you know, whenever you enter into a new country, you often face a lot of challenges. And some of the challenges often come from the citizen of that country. This was not exceptional from the Rwandese who came to the DRC at the time. Yes, they possessed the land to have their crops, to feed their animals, but they didn't own an entire area they can call their own. When they were trying to expand themselves within the country, they were facing challenges, just like many other tribes, as you know. Historically, this is what used to happen. This tribe, we fight with this tribe, we take the land. But as for the Rwandese, all the land were already occupied. So wherever they arrived in the DRC, they were considered as the foreigners or the refugees. They would let them stay in a particular area. For this reason, those Rwandese who were in the DRC struggled to become Congolese due to external pressure. And as he was trying to play down this idea of tribes in the country, Mobutu, the former president of the Congo, decided to grant most of Rwandese who were in Congo a Congolese nationality around 1972. But as you know, when a country is led by a dictator, no accurate law that was actually put in place. It's just this man who decided to do this. But later on in 1982, decided to withdraw this nationality offered or given as a collection. But when they tried to withdraw this law, this didn't come into law to withdraw this nationality. So the damage, one can say, was already done. And the idea of drawing the nationality itself caused another damage, because in reality is many Congolese did not agree with this. And this idea of giving most of Rwandese a collective nationality, but at the same time taking it away, also made it difficult for Rwandese to found themselves, especially those who already had hope to see themselves as Congolese. But at the same time, you also have to understand that the other Rwandese who came into the country among these groups made it very difficult for this idea of Rwandese nationality, because it becomes so difficult to differentiate them. It was so hard to people. See the difference, who were in the country, who were not, who is new and who's not. As many Rwandese were allowed to not just stay in the camps. If you take those who stayed in the camps, many other Rwandese within this movement lived in different areas of the country. Remember, we are talking about a dictator, and when a dictator takes a decision, he's not following the law. He even controls the law. So he takes decision of whatever he wants to happen. This doesn't mean the entire country or the law of that country agree with this decision. And this was always a problem. Just like many other decisions that Mobutu was taking, many Congolese did not agree with, but he had to force what he wanted to take place. You remember what I said? He owned everything. He had the first say and the last say. He was one of the richest. So many Congolese did not agree with this, because the idea of being a Congolese is not based on giving an entire group of people a nationality. Now, in order for these Rwandese to differentiate themselves from the Rwandese who were coming from Rwanda, they decided to call themselves Banyamulenge. Mulenge, which is a mountain in Kivu. So why Banyamulenge or why Mulenge? Remember what I said, that different tribes were known by their land where they live. That's how their cities came to be. Their villages came to be. So Rwandese who were in the DRC, they had to attach themselves to a land. That's how they came to choose a name of a mountain, so that they can be linked with the land which is a mountain. Later, we will then talk about how this became a problem to the point where this recent conflict in the DRC being justified as to actually liberate this group of Banyamulenge. Now I will go back to Rwanda. During 1990, the person who was the president of Rwanda at the time was a Hutu by the name of Habyarimana. At this time, Paul Kagame, who have spent many years in Uganda, he became a soldier there. He served in the government of Museveni and became a rebel. At this time, the Tutsi formed a Tutsi rebel group, and the aim was to topple the government in Rwanda. Remember what I said? This country has the history of the Hutu take over, the Tutsi willing to take over. The Tutsi take over, the Hutu willing to take over. So after the rebel group of Kagame conducted a conflict in Rwanda, that led to push the government to come to an agreement. And as they were holding talk in Arusha in Tanzania to integrate these rebel groups within the government or to share power, after the talk in Tanzania, the president of Rwanda and the president of Burundi, I don't know how two presidents who were going in two different countries came to share a flight. I have no idea, don't ask me that. As they reached Rwanda, the flight was shot by a missile. This perhaps is also a story you have heard. Remember, we are telling the history first, and then we will come into difficult things where we will give an analysis. So after the two presidents were assassinated or killed, many Hutus blamed the Tutsi rebel group, and they started going in the country to found the Tutsi. Then within those days, they killed each other, where according to the source, the majority of the people who were killed became to be the Tutsi. Now, Paul Kagame and his men invaded the country, took over the country, and took over power. And perhaps to justify this so that it doesn't look bad, Paul Kagame decided to put somebody else as a president for a period of time, seen by some that it was just a gesture for him so that he doesn't end up jumping in power, for him to have a way of seeing how things were going to play about. So the genocide took place. Many were killed. Many ran into different countries, including, of course, some of those who took part in the genocide. I just want to let you know that nobody knew exactly every individual who took part in the genocide. There is a reason why I'm saying this, because where people are killing each other, you are not there. You won't know exactly who did what, especially if you're seeing the population between them killed each other. Unless if there's a particular group that is doing that, then you will be able to know that, okay, in this group, there was this person, this person, this person. So in this sense, when Paul Kagame came to power, his first agenda was to deal with the genocide. And what happened is they had to go after those who took part in the genocide. This itself off, according to the source, Kagame and his men also took part in the killing. They even had the audacity to even go in the other countries such as the DRC and commit a lot of massacre in the Congo. According to the source, during the time where the genocide was taking place, the men of Kagame were pushing people to run in the DRC. And this will make sense to you after. They pushed many people to run into the DRC, even those who wanted to run into other neighboring countries. You will know why, or perhaps you ask yourself why. So the government of Rwanda was able to go in Congo, massacred many people in the name of following those who took part in the genocide. A lot of crimes were committed under the international community eyes, and as you know, Kagame was supported by different power since he was a rebel and a rebel involved in the killing. And when you are looking at this idea of democracy, it wouldn't justify him as an elected leader. Many would have questioned his legitimacy of becoming a president. It would have looked like a coup. So politically, you can understand this, right? So by the time he became a president, he was supported by the international community. Many countries felt sorry for Rwanda, what has happened, and the international community was blamed because they failed Rwanda at the time. They're the one who supposed to go and assist Rwanda, but the assistance did not come. This act was seen as a failure of the international community, which even today, you cannot talk about how international community have failed countries without looking at the Rwanda genocide. Particularly France was blamed more because France soldiers were on the ground. So when Kagame took power, like I said, he was able to confront the international community. And you know, when you fail somebody who is below you or who you're supposed to protect, you'll be shamed. You won't have much to say or to explain. They were held accountable, and they have to try to do whatever they can to switch the story or to dry the tears of Rwandese. Of course, meaning that they had to provide aid and other forms of assistance to support Rwanda's government. Of course, with those superpower behind who supported Kagame, they had to push for this agenda so that to make sure that Kagame had everything he needed. Remember, the genocide took place in 1994. This is a rebel group, become a government, and within 2 years, they were well organized to go to Congo or to Zaire and start one of the largest war that came to be known as the First Africa War, or the largest war in Africa, the Congo War. A rebel group that was fighting for years has now taken over a country gone under genocide. Issues, problems, or wherever the killing, deal with that within 2 years and organize an army that can invade a second or third largest country in the continent. Think about that for a minute. A country not just in terms of the size, but a country which on the head of it was a dictator who had the power to protect himself in one way or the other. Are you thinking about that for a minute? This is a very tiny country, poor country, with all this that has happened in 2 years, having all this power to conduct another war somewhere else. Think. And then they took over the DRC like I've already explained, right? And then since the two wars that broke out in 1996 and 1998, there was never a time that we saw Rwanda abandon the country. Yes, some soldiers returned. Now, since then, the DRC have never had full peace. That country has gone under conflict, where different terrorist groups and the rebel groups were formed. And the idea was to be able to keep the country, like I mentioned to you, in chaos. Every group control one particular area where the government will always look as a fail or a failure. This is something was prepared for many, many years. And to tell you about that, I will take you over to the history. You see, in 1885, there was a conference held in Germany, which is called Berlin Conference. This was to discuss about how Western powers were going to divide Africa and control Africa. But Africa was already divided because many countries were already colonized as many countries as they could around the world. So this conference came to be known as the Congo's Conference. Why the Congo's Conference? Remember what I said to you, that there was pressure that were put in place to make sure that King Leopold II abandoned the DRC and handed it to Belgium. And since Belgium as a country did not colonize the DRC, they came to an agreement that they cannot leave that country to the Belgium. So the country of the Congo should belong to everybody. So everyone who wants to serve himself goes to Congo, according to the source. Congo was left to be a place where all this power can serve themselves without one interrupting the other. Remember, countries were colonized and they had the colonial master, so they knew each other who owned what. And these guys respected this. But with Congo, because of the discovery of the country, how large the country is, the mineral resources within that country that were discovered, they came to an agreement that it cannot be left for one particular country. Link this to what I'm saying to you. This country was left to fail, to struggle, to suffer, to never have a stable government that is able to control the entire country. Today you hear people who will claim that, oh, the government of Kinshasa fell because the Congo is too big. Is Congo bigger than the US? Is Congo bigger than Russia? Is Congo bigger than China? Congo is the 11th largest country in the world. Algeria is even larger than the Congo. Sudan was larger than the Congo. So there is a large countries there in the world, and they are managed by one president or a minister somewhere. You have even kingdoms or this colonial, they colonized places. They were not even just able to control their own country, but many other countries around the world. So whenever you hear an argument like that, just listen and look at that person and think how stupid this is. So a lot of movements similarly were created in the country where people like from Katanga were armed. They will push them to demand their part. So these movements are movements that took place many years during 1960-something, 70s, 80s in order to continue to create the chaos in the Congo. And this, as you know, this is how conflict had done in many countries or in many areas of the world where different conflicts are introduced. Of course, a conflict always have to have a reason, whether they have to be an agenda of religion, tribe, ethnicity, color. But is this always the problem? Because the recent conflict in the DRC by the so-called M23 is being understood by some, including the M23 themselves, claiming that this is a group of the Banyamulenge people in the country who are fighting because they are being discriminated, not being accepted by the Congolese government. They are the minority and so on. This is how some came to know this movement, or this is the way this group in particular is making their calls. But I want to remind you that before M23, there were different groups as such, but they have only changed the names. And whenever there is agreement between Rwanda and the Congo, this group goes in silence. So in that case, you have to ask yourself, where is the Banyamulenge within all this time? You can ask yourself that if they want to fight for their position, if they are being discriminated, if they are not being given their share, whenever there is anything to do with Rwanda, such agreement is put in place, you forget about the story. And whenever these guys are out of power or positions, they will start this movement again. Remember what I said to you, in this country, there are more than 300 tribes, which means almost every tribe is a minority. So in this case, there's never a tribe that hold the power in different position, because the power in the Congo is not distributed based on your tribe, or this is Baluba or Bashi or whatever. No. Yes, they usually that idea where you see when somebody, the president, for example, is Muluba, like the one who's in power today, Tshisekedi, other tribes are looking. They will also try to see where they will take power, what area they will take power, not with the guns, but through normal process. And these movements I've told you that have been encouraged within the country historically, these are done on purpose, just like you see in many other countries you see around the world today. So when you're listening to this story of Congo, Rwanda, what I want to say is you have to know who you're listening to, because you hear even many respected people talking about the conflict in Congo being between the so-called Banyamulenge and the rest of the Congo. Is the gun the solution? One of the questions I can ask you, where do you think a small community. We have one of the largest army, or we fight war after war within the country for years. Taking in consideration, you are talking about poor communities here without the support of the outside. So this is also something we are going to touch on. Going back to the President Paul Kagame, stayed in power to these days, almost 30 years. He has won every election with more than a 95%, where he has even won elections with 99%, which means there's only 1% left. So taking in terms of the populations, it means that if there is oppositions parties, only the Twa have voted the other parties or the other people who want to be elected as a president. The rest are in love with the president, Paul Kagame. So you have to remember, no matter who you are, you always have people who like you or people who doesn't like you. People who oppose you, people who support you. And as you stay in power for so long, you even lose the support of many people. It doesn't matter what you do. Even Jesus Christ, the one who came to save the world, was denied by many until today. But you have a president here who have the support of 99%. Can you think of any other president in the world who has won election like this? And would you take an example? If there is, do you see that president as a legit president or a democratic country? That is the question for you to ask yourself. Today we are going to ask more questions than answers. And many of the answers, you complete them by yourselves. But remember what I said, you have to always remove your emotions. If you have reached this far, it would be nice for me to repeat this. That means you are somebody who likes to learn or who is interested in this analysis. So I want to remind you that I said earlier, don't attach your emotions within these things, particularly if you are a citizen of these countries. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to judge the Congolese. I'm not here to judge the Rwandese. I'm not here to judge Mr. Paul Kagame and other leaders or the international community. I'm here to actually tell you the story that perhaps you have heard or you have not heard, particularly what you might think might have another story behind. This is the reason why I said we are focusing on the question. And if you allow me to continue, trust me, you will have things that you will discover or things that you will learn within this conversation. Now we are going to look at the beautiful stories that the President Paul Kagame has brought to Rwanda and Africa or the world. On the other hand, we will look at some of the criticism that he has received during his time in power. Yes, I may not be able to mention every critics or every positive thing he has done, and what I am going to say is not coming from me. It's coming from what I have seen people talking about, the media, ordinary citizens, and so on. So this is not from me, and I will encourage you, whatever is being discussed here, don't just take it as it comes. That's the job that we do. We tell you the information, we tell you the story, and you double check this information. If you doubt, there's a lot of sources there that can actually provide you with the information of what I'm saying here. But when I said the source, I said you have to remember whose story you are reading. Who are you listening to? That matters. So let's start by beautiful story. One of the beautiful story about Paul Kagame was that he reunited the country after the genocide. He came to be seen as a hero. He dealt with those who took part in the genocide. He followed them wherever they went and brought them to justice, right? Remember what I said, Paul Kagame went in different countries. Even today, they're still chasing other people to bring them the justice. So he made sure the justice was served for the Rwandese. He made sure Rwandese had a reconciliation where families came to talk in order to live as one society. In order to do that, he made sure that Rwandese are not identified by their ethnicity. Did you hear what I said? There's not these things of Tutsi or Hutu or Twa. They are all Rwandese. Some of the arguments that you hear there to prove this point is that they do not want something else like the genocide to take place. They don't want to divide their community again. And as a solution, what they have to do is to make sure that not Tutsi, not Hutu, not Twa, just Rwandese. And perhaps that have worked, we will find out in this conversation. So he has kept his country stable. Stable means economically, yes, Rwanda remains one of the poorest countries on earth. When I say one of, I'm not saying saying Rwanda is the least poorest country. I'm saying one of. It means one among the poor countries in the world. Within that, he has been seen as doing okay with the economy. And other way of keeping the country stable, it means that there's no war. Remember, he took the country by force. But since then, there's no war within the country. And even when we're talking about this conflict in the DRC, no war in Rwanda. So he has kept that country stable. There's no issue with the politicians or where you can see protesting and all this and that, where they want to change for the last 30 years. For some, that is a wonderful thing. He has transformed the face of Rwanda, particularly Kigali, in terms of infrastructures. Beautiful buildings have been built in Kigali. He has promoted his country on international level where investors have come to invest. You have seen the advertisement of what I mentioned earlier. You've probably seen the advert of Visit to Rwanda in some of largest football club in the world, such as Arsenal and PSG. He has promoted many women. This is another credit that the President Paul Kagame have received. Many came to see him as a Pan-Africanist, somebody who has the love of Africa, a great leader, somebody who challenged the Westerners, the other powers, the superpowers, and is a Pan-Africanist. Remember what I said, a Pan-Africanist is somebody who cares for Africans. The land of Africa is somebody who puts Africa first before many things. And when you are talking about Africa, you are not talking about trees. You are talking about people in the first place before you talk about anything else. It means that it's somebody who puts his people first, promote them, encourage them, provide them with freedom, with education, with many beautiful things you can name. And he has this great relationship with African countries where, as you know, he talks about peace. He's a peacemaker. That is the idea of Pan-Africanist in a sense of, African first, Africa champion. Rwanda without Africa is like nothing. Remember the idea of Ghana independence without the independence of Africa is like nothing. So it's the champions of that. To these days, for some, Paul Kagame is a great leader. And these are some of the positive things that people say Paul Kagame has achieved or has done, or some of the wonderful things people have said about him, including also some of the things that he feel that he has done or he see himself as being. And if there is any other ones that I might think of, I will mention it as I go along. Now we can look at the negative things. Many have criticized Paul Kagame in a sense that there are those who have said he was seen to be behind the assassination of the former president of Rwanda by the name of Habyarimana. Remember what I said, he was the rebels group leader, and after the talk in Arusha, the president was killed on his way. The missile that shot the plane was said to be from his group. So that's the first thing. So straight away you already see the critics starting from the president. People already blame him for the death of the president. But what led to the genocide was after the killing of this president. Many also blamed him for taking part in the genocide, him and his rebel group. So they were part of the killing within the genocide. Paul Kagame is blamed to have killed many people, and even until today, he's still on the hunt of many in and out of Rwanda, particularly those who oppose him or those who do not agree with how he's running the country. These are critics. According to many, Paul Kagame is a dictator. Based on what he has done, he has kept the country for himself. And in order to back up this, follow people whom he's not 100% sure took part in the genocide. This was seen as a way to undermine the Hutus. And to back this up, Paul Kagame often said this in the media. He said, if you mess with the country, it will come after you, wherever you are. There is a critics of him killing the journalists, putting many in jail, torture them, kidnapping many in and out of the country, shutting the media and control the entire media. People not having freedom of speech. If you are heard criticizing Paul Kagame in Rwanda, is either you spend the rest of your life in prison or that will be the last day you will ever see the sun again. There is a cases in the killing of people in South Africa, politicians, soldiers, and so on. All these are parts of the critics. He have used the genocide as a way to manipulate and control everyone, including Rwandese population, neighboring countries, donors, investors, the international community, where you receive aid and support through this idea of the genocide. Use the excuse of going in Congo time to time to control the country and stealing minerals in the name of pursuing those who took a part in the genocide. I want to remind you that the genocide took part in 1994. Today we are in 2025. You know how many years is that? So if you think about those who took a part in the genocide, who were men and women, by this time most of them would be over 50. So they are not young men to fight wars and conflict or to prepare themselves to go to war. I just want to put that in your head so that you also think about that. So he is also criticized of promoting wrong statistics of poverty in his country. He has used scammers to manipulate the media. He has used robots on Twitter and other social platforms. These are accusations that people have said, and some of these things are things where people have provided evidence in your own time. I'm not here to prove you this, what other people have said, but double check whatever I'm saying. When we said about him going after anyone who opposes him, use his power and control to make sure that there is not any other political opponent who can be able to challenge him in an election, while those who criticize the idea have said that those who represent as oppositions in Rwanda election are just people who are put there to actually stand there to show that there's an election, but in reality there's no election in Rwanda, because election is often won before it even starts. Whenever there is election of Rwanda, people often already predict the outcome before the election takes place. Some have gone too far, like I mentioned, calling the president Paul Kagame and compare him to the Hitler of Africa. Remember what Hitler did, but others see him, he has gone even beyond that. When Hitler killed the Jews, you know the number of the Jews he killed, but this man is seen to have killed more than 15 million of Congolese. These are just Congolese, but if you take the responsibility of him to those who he have assassinated within the country and outside of his country, then you do your maths and see how many people this man may have killed. Again, this is a critic. Paul Kagame has also been criticized for promoting and placing his family and those who are close to him in many key positions of institutions within the country in order to control what goes in and out of the country. Almost all his children are working in key positions of institutions within the country, and the recent one being one of his young child who was promoted within the last few years to the position of a military general. And for many, this is a preparation of somebody who can come after him. Paul Kagame has also been criticized for being a puppet of the Westerners or the power outside. Remember when we said this is a Pan-Africanist, is a great leader. He has been criticized. He makes a speech out here talking, but behind it, he is the puppet of other powers around the world who use him to go in the DRC, to go to Central African Republic, today in Mozambique, where you have seen a lot of protests. You have seen accusation of rape and control in Central African Republic. You have heard the story of them being in Congo, Brazzaville, trying to buy the land there. Today, Rwanda is one of the biggest contributor of peacekeepers in Africa. And all these have been used in order to cover whatever bad he's doing so that he can look like he's a good man. He's there to help. He can help Central African Republic. He can help Mozambique. He can help the UN. He's a peacemaker. Paul Kagame has also been criticized for only working with those who agree with him. Recently, there have been critics where families are not allowed to have funerals for any of the soldiers who are being killed in the DRC. The international community, on the other hand, have proved that Paul Kagame is in the DRC for all these years. His men support the M23. He supports other rebel groups. Even today, as we're talking, there are more than 4,000 Rwandese soldiers in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. When I say the international community, this is the founding by the UN, who have seen is direct support of those who carry this killing, this raping in the Congo. For all these years, Paul Kagame has also been criticized by the same UN for stealing minerals day in, day out in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Not just that, the Rwanda of Paul Kagame do not have a good relationship with the DRC, but also have a bad relationship with Burundi. These two countries have always come close to go into a war, and their borders are more likely to be closed. As we are talking today, Burundi closed its border with Rwanda because it accused Rwanda for sending and arming the rebels on the border of its country to topple the government. Burundi have also accused Rwanda for sending terrorist group to massacre people in Burundi. There have also been at times where the soldiers of Paul Kagame and Uganda have voted directly between them in the DRC, where many people were killed. Another critics is that the majority of key positions of institutions within the country are allocated only to Tutsi people. Now let's analyze this data, and I want you to pay more attention from this moment. Everything that I have been saying so far has sources out there, and I'm yet to put my opinion in it, and sources that can be found, most of them with evidence. So now is the time for us to start questioning certain things, and then we conclude. This is where it gets quite interesting. We will start with Paul Kagame coming to power before we cross to the DRC or his connection with the DRC. Normally, some people say that whenever there is a coup, those who often benefit most are those who were behind it. This saying usually shows that in order for Paul Kagame to benefit from his presidential for so many years, is that he was behind the killing of the president, and the reason for this is because he was fighting already to take the power. So now we start by looking at those who see Paul Kagame as a hero. My number one point is that yes, Paul Kagame is a hero, but the question is a hero to who? Who has he served? Because a hero saves people, or a hero saves something, can be an animal, nature, and so on. You can never be a hero for everybody. You will be a hero for a particular group, of course. When there was a legitimate president and Paul Kagame was fighting, who do you think he was fighting for? The history has shown us that he was fighting for the Tutsi to come to power, and at the end he managed to do that. And since it is the minority of the population that is in power, there have to be implementation of different measures that has to be put in place. This is where you have to see election is not done in a transparent way, right? In terms of oppositions, for example, think about somebody who can become a politician to try to challenge a president who have been there for years, or to challenge a hero of a country. You have to think about parties that have been in power for many years. In order for you to put yourself forward to challenge that party or to challenge that particular president, you have to prepare yourself well. So now you have to think about an opposition who have to stood up to challenge Paul Kagame. Do you think he will just wake up one day and start a movement, have 4,000 people supporting him, and that's it, is ready to go to an election or to win election? Because when we are talking about the election of Rwanda, only 1% vote for the opposition leaders. So if there is a 2-3 opposition leaders, they share 1% of the vote of the population of Rwanda. And those leaders are committed to have parties or to go to an election to spend the money. Where does the money come to actually support them to make sure that with the number of the people to the point where they go to an election? You have to remember that in many countries, candidates usually drop even on the last day of campaigning of an election. And one of the reasons why they often withdraw from taking part in an election is because they see how things as goals. If they see they do not have a chance to win, they will withdraw from the election. But here you are talking about political opposition leaders in Rwanda who every year prepare for election, and some of these political opposition leaders have taken part in 1 or 2 elections. So just for them to go and share 1% of the vote, if that was you, would you continue to spend the money to campaign? And this is not just one particular individual. We are talking about when the President Paul Kagame win election with 99%, just like last year, 2024. Therefore, let's say if you have 3 political leaders, these 3 political leaders, we basically share 1% of the vote of the population in the election. What chance any of these opposition leaders have to win election in Rwanda? Do that maths. And these guys will just be campaigning, spend money, right? For a couple of months. What do we mean by campaigning? Campaigning, it means that you are going to different areas, and around this area, you can see the number of the people who are coming there to support you. Then you have others who are behind the scene, who are supporting you on the internet, economically, money. You have to have people who are supporting the parties before you come to a decision that you are going to challenge any president in place. So for those who think that these guys are usually put there just to represent, if you think about what I just said to you, do you still see them as legit candidate? That is a question for you to ask yourself and to look at. Now let's go back. Remember where I said that in Rwanda today, you cannot be identified by ethnicity. Think about this. The majority of us are identified on international level by nationality, by our race, the color of our skin, our ethnicity, our gender, and culture, language, religion, and so on. But now, an identification of an entire country has been taken away in order to prevent another genocide to take place, or in order to prevent these groups from fighting, or to stop what happened in 1994 from happening again. We are talking about the genocide. But the question is, does this mean that there's still a hate there that exists between these 3 groups? And if there is a hate, do you see the best solution as taking the ethnicity of these people or hiding hate as the best solution forward? It's like all this conflict that we have seen between religion, Muslim and Christians. In many parts of the world, you have seen this conflict. Do you think the best solution will be to say, from today, you are not all going to be identified as Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and so on, but will be identified as believers? How many people will accept that? And the justification or the reason behind is to prevent another issue such as the one we had happening. You have to question that. Even Western countries that do not have these tribes, ethnicity is something that is very relevant in terms of our identity. And somebody who loses identity is just like somebody who have lost himself. It's called identity. It's something to identify who you are. We may just all be identified as Africans or just black people or the people. I would love to see maybe Rwanda pushing this agenda and get this idea of identity, small, single identity where we can all be identified as people. The President Paul Kagame speak louder on international level. Surprisingly, I never heard this. Now, think about something else here. At this time, this is a country where the Tutsi are in power. And if the Tutsi are the one who are in power, who control almost everything, and who have stayed in power for 30 years, this idea of reconciliation and ethnicity thing, let's say if the power is based on ethnicity group, who do you think at this particular time will benefit or gain? Or who do you think will lose or are losing? So, of course, you have those who have said that reconciliation has been done and the President Paul Kagame is a champion. But you have not passed this level before you even conclude this. Don't you think it would be nice to see an election of a Hutu or a Twa person comes in the country, lead the country for many years before we even start looking at what was done as a positive thing in terms of this idea idea of everything that was put in place in terms of identification. Because if the idea here was to elect people or people to use election based on their identification, which you found main politics in Africa is based on this, or even on the world scale. Now, if you take this idea of identity, people won't know who's voting them. And again, this idea of these critics where they are saying the majority of people who are holding key power within the institutions of Rwanda. Tutsi, don't you see a problem there? Also, if people know that this person who's working in this position is Tutsi or Hutu or that, it will show clearly who occupied which positions. But when these statistics are in the computer, are somewhere where people can be seen, people who voted, people who are in certain positions are from this ethnicity, do you see the problem within that? Or do you still see beauty within that situation? Now, we move on and look at how Paul Kagame, for instance, have promoted women. You have to come to understand that women, our mothers, are usually seen as a peacemaker. And it is wonderful to see them being placed in a key position. Wonderful, President Paul Kagame and your government. That is fantastic, because in many countries, if they follow your example, this will be wonderful. But you also have to take in consideration that the fact that women are usually being seen in politics as peacemaker or as peaceful, in this sense, when you have women as the opposition or around you, this can be seen on the other hand that you are more likely to not have, powerful challenges coming towards you, people trying to overthrow you, people trying to take the power from you, because they're more likely to relax mostly in their positions. It means that there are no people who are hungry for power. How many women have you heard in the world they have taken part in the coup and became leaders or presidents? In this sense, having women around within institutions is a positive thing, because it shows that we are promoting women, but they can also be used because people who are in power knows that they won't have much trouble around them. Don't you think so? It's possible, isn't it? I'm only asking. There are no people who are more likely to encourage people to carry guns and topple this government and do that. So these women, on one side, it is a wonderful story to know that they are being promoted in the position. But on the other side, when you're analyzing something, they can just be used to be there to keep President Paul Kagame to continue going, to have no problem with those around him. And in terms of those who say negatively is a dictator, of course, a dictatorship started by somebody who's not elected democratically in one way or the other. But on the election level, you already see somebody who can win with 99% of the vote. That's not legit. Come on. And even sometimes those who actually proclaim these elections don't play this well, because it's revealing too much. At least if they give him 75%, 70%, people will be able to understand. Give money to this other candidate, but the idea here they can win a minimum so that they don't overtake, because here you have to be careful. And I feel like this is the fear. If you encourage these leaders to earn a little bit power, to win a bit more votes, you never know. You find yourself, the election is proclaimed, here's Mr. Paul Kagame with 45%. Then you see what is going to happen. Many countries around the world protest. Have you ever seen in the media people in Rwanda protest? If you think about it, people in Rwanda must be the happiest people on the planet. Even the happiest people in the world, they protest. I never see a protesting event in Rwanda of many people, unless if it's a small group of a particular leader or a particular individual person protesting with a few people, and before you know it, you hear that that person has been jailed. So you are questioning this freedom in Rwanda. And when you hear many media being closed because they bring different views, when you look at Rwanda's media, the entire media is always supporting the government. So the idea of dictatorship, you can kind of see it. When we look at the President Paul Kagame, you come to find out it is true. Yes, Paul Kagame has developed Rwanda in some sense. Has done a wonderful job there. People say when you look at Rwanda, particularly Kigali, is seen as a beautiful city. But many will tell you that it's a city that is under a promotion. It's a show showing, the capital is an image of the country. Behind that, when you go to other areas, they are forgotten. Almost everything is in Kigali. And that is to attract the people who come to invest in the country, the event that come to be held in the country, which of course is a clever way to do. Many country does that. But yes, we are looking at this idea where the other areas are forgotten. It's up to you to look on that. Something else beautiful that Rwanda have been known for. Remember what I said, if there's something else positive, I will mention it. Something else just popped on my head. Rwanda of Paul Kagame is known of being one of the cleanest countries in Africa. And remember what I just said. When you are trying to show something for people to come and see, visit Rwanda. But what things do you think you see when you visit in Rwanda? Will probably be the gorilla in the mountain, one of the biggest things that you visit will be the genocide areas. And then, of course, you have to see how Rwanda is clean and so on. So this place has to be clean. Yes, they have to be credit, but the way people talk about this idea of Rwanda is clean, sometimes you just think like Africans or we black people, when you suffer too much, you even forget what is wonderful for you. And I also remember to say that Rwanda get a lot of aid from international community. You have a lot of aid from the UK, US, from France, from Belgium, from Europe Union, you name it. Whether that is positive, whether that is negative, it just depends on how you want to look at this. Most of you are more likely to praise president a lot, right? And this is one thing that kind of usually piss me off. I have said this in my other podcasts. The way that people praise some of our leaders to a level that you can never imagine. Or sometimes these leaders also want to be worshipped because, let's say, they have built the road, they have built a stadium, they have built a school, and they want to be praised to a level that you can never imagine. He's a great leader. This is wonderful. Come on, let's take an example of Rwanda. Rwanda is a very small country. Think about this. Rwandese, they work, they pay tax. Where does all that tax money go to? Then, if what is being said here is to be true, that Rwanda steal minerals day in, day out of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, take that money, put on top of the tax that Rwandese people pay. Rwanda often claim to have mineral resources and that they are the largest producer of coltan. Think about that. Take all that money, put on top of this money we already mentioned here. Now, you have to take all these aids that we just mentioned from the UK, the US, France. This is every year. Take all that money, put on top of the money that we already have. Now, you also have to remember that when there is a building, let's say a stadium or Hima-Tutsi stadium, this may not be Rwandese government that has built this stadium. You need investors to come to invest in the country. Some of these buildings that you see around are not built by the government. Some of these roads that you see around, they are not built by the government. Investors, sometimes private investors, invest in the country. So take all that into consideration. If you put all that money together, and the way you guys sometimes praise Kigali or Rwanda being beautiful or amazing, take all this money in consideration. See what it can do in a small country like Rwanda. Don't you think this can transform the life of many Rwandese all over the country? And not just in Kigali, because when you talk about the beauty of Rwanda, this is Kigali that is more likely to have a presentation. Just like I've always said, the capital is the face of the country, is more likely to be where everybody wants to go, a place that should attract people. But what I want you to think about is all this money we have spoken about here, can this only transform, let's say, Kigali? And when you go around Kigali, do you feel that all this money have been spent in Kigali? And when I mention about leaders wanting to be worshipped, I wasn't talking mainly about Paul Kagame. I talk about this often, particularly in African countries. But if you take in consideration that you are talking about somebody who have been in power for 30 years, and for these 30 years, Congolese have always cried for all these mineral resources, right? Rwanda have always claimed to have mineral resources. Since the genocide, Rwanda have always received all these package of aid from international community, different organization. Something else is loans. A lot of countries have loans. So if you were in that position, let's say you have all this money and you are generous, Can you not transform an entire country such as Rwanda? But when you go in other areas of Rwanda, do you see where this money has been spent? This is the question of some of you who are more likely to praise things. This president, he's a great leader. Oh, he talk about corruption. Okay, he talk about corruption. He is against corruption. Then you come to me and tell me that he has placed his member families and those who are close to him in key institutions. Okay, he fights against corruption, but all the investment is going in one place, or let's say one particular city, And some of you go so far to describe Rwanda as being very developed. Which Rwanda are you talking about? And this is not me being against Rwanda or anything, because I know some of you, this is the way you're more likely to think. Oh, you can think whatever you think. That's exactly what I'm here for, to help you think, including what I'm saying. This particular point here and many other points I have talked about, like you see the way I speak, it's nothing to do with Rwanda only. It could be something to do with people who are more likely to put common sense behind. The government has built a school for the money that you have paid for tax, and all that credit should be gone to that government. The government should be the one to be praised, to be worshipped. Right? Sometimes it's because you don't even know whether you have paid for tax. I don't even know whether because, like I said, when people suffer for a very long time, they forget to know sometimes what is good for them, what is great, what they deserve, and what is just normal for them to have. People forget this, right? But it is always important to look beyond the line. And sometimes, before you start praising too much somebody who have held power for too long, and you might even feel sorry for that person. And why do you think he's not leaving? If he wasn't somewhere where he really want to be, he will still be there. This person will quit, But when you are on top of the government, you are on top of everything within the country. You have power, and particularly if you're using power to go after everybody, who can mess up with you? And another thing that people don't often ask themselves is that, why do you think when people sit in power for a very long time, they don't want to come out of it? The fear is often because of what they have done, to other people. They are afraid this can come to bite them. And this is the reason why these guys try as much as they can to remain in power, particularly African leaders, to remain in power so that death can find them there. Whatever happens after them, they don't care. They can try to leave their sons and daughters in position, but they know behind them things can collapse. Things do collapse. You have to remember how people fought for slavery, and this was one of the most powerful things that was done at time. The time where even some nations didn't have the capacity to think beyond the line. Then you imagine today. Don't be afraid. Always try to stand firm. Don't just think about you. Think about the future of those who comes after you. How will my children be like in this country that we are in? Don't always settle for less. I love to see African country developed, but I also want to share the light so that people see where we are. Yes, we should appreciate our leaders, people who are committed to serve for the country day in, day out, but at the same time, that shouldn't blind us to not see what is also beyond there or what they are not also doing. When somebody is talking, you have to listen to what that person is not saying. Okay, that's another thing to think about. So now let's cross the border. I've already touched on the story of the so-called Banyamulenge when I spoke about how they cross in Congo to look at if they are Congolese or not. And my argument to that, I'm not sure this is how the way a nationality is usually given. You found many countries with many foreigners. Don't just give all of them nationalities. Yes, it can happen in an occasion, but this has to happen in a legitimate way, in a country where the law is respected. Because the reality is that if a particular decision was taken by a dictator or a leader who was in power or any other government, when the next government comes, these governments often have the power to change what was there. This is how politics works around the world. And Rwanda is not exceptional in this. They have a few examples. When Paul Kagame saw that the government in place was not working, he replaced the government and he changed this idea of ethnicities. He moved the country from French to English. And you have this idea of Rwanda to receive migrants from all over the world from Britain. A former British government of the time had already signed everything. Houses were already built. They were just even waiting for a flight to take off to start bringing people to Rwanda. But when a new government came in place, they decided they were not going forward with this plan and everything was blocked, right? Rwanda benefited from the money that they were already received, the houses that were already built, while Britain continue to deal with their migration problem. You see that? This is how politics works. Let's now get into this idea where you hear people say the problem that is happening in Congo is a Congolese problem. You have heard President Paul Kagame give a speech time to time. He will tell you what is happening in Congo is not a problem of Rwanda, but the Congolese problem. But question yourself, why is that almost everywhere President Paul Kagame goes, he's always defending this, or he has to justify this issue? He's the one who always have to explain himself about the Congo. No Burundi, no Uganda, no Tanzania. And as we have seen, of course, there have been times where he have said he's in Congo supporting the Rwandese community in the DRC. On the other hand, claim that they are in the DRC to go after those who took part in the genocide, referred as the FDLR, if that's the right way to say it. Year after year, for many years, it has been that way. You have even heard other people fell into this argument of saying that the recent conflict in the DRC is because of the so-called Banyamulenge or the Rwandese in Congo being discriminated or being refused their nationalities. And this is where I ask, do you think a small community of people who are suffering? We have sophisticated guns to fight a government year after year. I have seen people who have come to justify this. Some of the respected people within the continent, such as the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. I have heard him recently talking at African school, where he fell into this argument saying that this is the reason all these conflicts have taken place. I have also seen a respected, well-educated man, Professor Lumumba, also giving this view. How many countries do you think have forgotten tribes? Because when you look in the government, the majority of people are usually those who are in Kinshasa. The rest of the country is forgotten. But these people don't often take guns to start the wars. Killing and raping, is that a justification of being integrated within the community? These two individual respected men I have just mentioned, whom one of them also spoke about the problem deep in the Congo in terms of the minerals, the superpower, this history I've just given you. And recently when President Thabo Mbeki was talking about this on Africa School, he wondered why he never get an invitation of being a mediator within this conflict. Even him being a president and having the experience of what goes in Africa. You know, sometimes you look at our educated African people and you might raise your eyebrows. Mr. President, you already said this is a country where a particular group you say is being denied their citizenship. A country with more than 300 or 400 tribes. And now you say what is happening, it is because of that. And they should be given their citizenship. You already share your view. You already show who you support. So how do you become a mediator? It's like there are two ideologies that's fighting between them. And you already show you support one ideology. That is clear. This is the reason probably why you cannot be a mediator. Of course, maybe you could be an external advisor. But even when you hear these two men talking, you can kind of see where they're leaning. These are the men who make journeys. They are invited time to time to Rwanda. Even within this conversation I was talking about, the president Thabo Mbeki said he has an invitation to go to Rwanda. So you are close to one side. There's no way you can be a mediator. You have no hide your feelings. Even if you guys are well educated and you are a politician, this is not to say that if somebody like Uhuru Kenyatta is a mediator today, he doesn't have a view on which side he want to lean or who he believes. In this sense, a mediator is somebody who stands between two people, and each side has to be convinced that you are there for their interests. You are there for them. And if one particular side see that you are leaning on one side, then you are more likely to lose your position because the other person is not going to accept you to continue being the mediator. This is basic, isn't it? Now, I have already showed you the story of the Rwandese people in the DRC. And you said that they are a rebel group. Their rebellion shouldn't be against the population. It should be against politics or politicians. So I'm sure you get in somewhere. And in order to actually look at this idea of Rwanda supporting M23, when the president of Rwanda is talking about this, and you will see that he talks politics. And what I don't want you to do, probably you as an ordinary citizen, depending on which side you are, to be fooled by sometimes politics. That's his job. You don't have to follow into the idea. You have to question. It doesn't matter how much you love your father. You see your father bring money every day, bring you things every day, but you don't know exactly where your father works or whether he has a job or he works as a taximan, right? But you hear your father has bought a new house. He has bought a plane. He has bought this. Can you not question this? For your own good, you as a child. Because this is your future. When your father is gone, you may not be able to go through the same route that he has been going. I've already spoke that Rwandese have been in the DRC for many years. And that Rwanda's invaded Congo twice. And they never left. And to make it so complicated, the Rwandese coming from Rwanda made the story of the other Rwandese already in the Congo very difficult. And this was done deliberately. And this is where the Rwandese in Congo would not found themselves. And the reality is that many of these Rwandese have supported this movement of rebels or the terrorists that comes in. They have used them several times and they have been the victim of both sides. But it becomes difficult for them to find themselves whether they are Congolese. Some of them, they will say they are Congolese, they are Rwandese. Remember, I told you, Rwandese have been in many Congolese institutions before the government in the DRC in place. The one who was a prime minister was a minister of Rwandese heritage. People who run banks, people who run different institutions within the government on a regional level, on a national level, even in the army. Somebody who was once a powerful soldier in Congolese army became a general in the army of Rwanda. The man who was once a Congolese is now Rwandese. They have shifted. Even these so-called politicians of Rwandese heritage in the DRC have shifted the position. Whenever they lose their position in Congo, they go and they link themselves to Rwanda. Even the one I'm saying to be a minister today, the next day they are in Rwanda. And all these have made it difficult. So even these hungry, powerful men of Rwandese group who have been there to fight for power have used this particular group of Rwandese who have been in DRC for many years, have used them many times. And when they leave power, they abandon them. They will give them the cause, but the reality is this cause never arrived to succeed or to be achieved. Who suffer? It is the ordinary citizens or those of Kinyarwanda language in the DRC. And I feel for these people how they do not understand this. So if we know Rwanda invaded the Congo twice and all these reports have come in place, including the UN and other many powerful organizations, today as the war continues, Rwandese soldiers are being killed on Congolese soil. There are even those who are captured alive. Of course, Uganda's soldiers are being killed there as well and being caught. That's why you can see in Uganda, in Rwanda, and then if you look who is a president of Kenya today, what is his ethnicity? Straight away when the man came in power, he started directly supporting Rwanda and talking against the DRC. He made a speech that showed the support. These are the people who want to mediate, but the president before him, who didn't share the same route as him, was, and he is the mediator for the talk between rebel groups and the DRC today. But after that, he had his own problem. We are talking about President Ruto, and everything started collapsing on his hand. But now we have gone quite on international level. You remember this. In a very short time, President Ruto was talking, looking like a Pan-Africanist. But you remember what story followed. He changed his way of doing. You don't know how he came to power. So that is the job for you to research. So should we say really that Rwanda is not in Congo or not? I'm sure you now have the answer. And like I said, the president of Rwanda himself have said several times why they are there. On many occasions, again, he will say he's not there, right? So this is the story between the DRC and Rwanda that you hear in the media time to time. You have to also know that Rwanda could be one of the only country in East or Central Africa that do not have a great relationship with the other countries. And when I'm talking a great relationship, this is based in terms of either them being accused by the other countries or them clashing with the other countries. I'm not talking about if other countries join together to go against one country to try to steal its mineral resources and so on, but I'm talking about a country that have had a tough relationship with the other countries. Paul Kagame could be one of the only president in Africa where we have lost many other leaders and his name is involved. or people have mentioned his name in the death of almost 5 presidents in Africa. Number 1, Mobutu of Zaire. That came to do with Paul Kagame. After toppling him out of the power, the pressure of him being pushed out, that played an impact. You have Kabila, who was assassinated while Rwanda wanted to take over the Congo. You have the 2 presidents, Habyarimana and the president of Burundi at the time, where his name is also involved. His name also being mentioned on the death of another Burundi's president. You name any other president in Africa that can fall or has fallen into this box. That's a homework for you. Even the DRC government or many Congolese people and the UN have proved that Ugandans, soldiers, are also supporting this movement of M23. But Congo have kept this relationship with Uganda. So in this sense, President Paul Kagame is not good for Rwanda and the DRC, if one can say that. It could be good for one country, but perhaps on the side of the DRC, his arrival has been a disaster. And you have seen him talking about the number of refugees in his country. He even talked about it in a way that you can never imagine. But remember what I said to you, historically, Rwandese have always run into Congo. But you don't hear this Congolese leaders coming and they blast these refugees like, oh, I have these Rwandese refugees day per day, just like President Paul Kagame bragged about these Congolese refugees who many say to be refugees who came from Rwanda and resided in the DRC. So when all these conflicts take place, they go back to Rwanda. This is what many have said. Even resolving this problem is becoming an issue because the Congolese government said we involve the UN in order to identify these people. They have been attempted to try to bring these people home. But the critics shows that Paul Kagame do not want to send them home so that he can continue to say that he has Congolese refugees in his country. That can continue to show a great image of Rwanda at the international level. So now let's conclude this. In conclusion, I want to give you something to take away. Remember, the question is whether the arrival of President Paul Kagame has been the blessing or a curse to the DRC and Rwanda, because these 2 countries have never had a great relationship since his coming. He came with the guns and the guns continue in his neighboring countries. My conclusion is that with all this information provided, Rwanda government operates in the DRC and they are not there to support this small group of the so-called Banyamulenge, and the so-called Banyamulenge people are being used, just like how the refugees have been used, just like how the genocide was used in order to eliminate many people, just like how the genocide was also used as a way to go after other people who opposed Paul Kagame, including the innocent. Today, many oppositions are brought to justice of President Paul Kagame in the name of different reasons. There's always a reason there. And I feel for the Congolese because them being generous by opening their doors to welcome Rwandese, particularly those who came after the genocide, has changed the story of their life. But you have to remember that this is not a problem that started with the genocide. Remember what I said about the history. You have to take all these things in consideration. And at the same time, you have to look at who is doing what or who is saying what. With every conflict or every war, there is a power or people behind that you do not see. It's not only the people you see dying on the front line. You don't see politicians on the war front, but who you see are soldiers, but you don't see those in suit, do you? So Congo has a population of more than 100 million, and the Rwandese community in the DRC are not more than 5, perhaps million, and maybe that number I've exaggerated. And today, if they are not accepted by the Congolese people, and on the other hand, President Paul Kagame was ready to receive many migrants around the world. Many. He built even houses in a very short period of time. Remember the story I told you, a story you know already. If he cares so much about these brothers and sisters from Rwanda, how come he has not made a call where he can say, brothers and sisters of Kinyarwanda language or Rwandese in the DRC, you have suffered for so long. These Congolese people do not want you there. Come home. Whoever who's ready to come home, we provide a house for him or her. How come he has not made this call? This is a generous man. Don't you think this might be a good gesture? Because I would imagine many of the Rwandese in the DRC would love to come to Rwanda and live there. Number one, because they will be accepted there. Any human being would think this way and they would say, you know what, let's go where we are accepted. And they will relate better with Rwanda because of the culture, the share, traditions and religions, language, comparing to the DRC. This may be one of the better solutions. I'm only saying, since President Paul Kagame showed the generosity to help others around, Rwandese, Tutsi are struggling, cannot fund themselves in another country, while Rwanda has a space where you can allocate them. And you don't have to take all of them. You can maybe ask a particular number willing to come voluntary. That is just my way of seeing. And I believe there may be other people there who might think the same way as I do. And the brothers and sisters of Kinyarwanda in the DRC, the so-called Banyamulenge, I'll probably advise that you have to choose a side. If you want to be Congolese, you cannot mix yourself with the other Rwandese, and perhaps choose another way you can fight this battle, where you can ask for nationalities. Perhaps as the DRC starts to being managed very well, you can ask for nationality individually, or people who goes away, they do this thing, or put the guns down, ask the international community and the other source peacefully to help you. The guns is not going to solve the problem. You are the minority, you continue to be the minority. And the Rwanda will continue to mix you in the problem. Today, when you look at the critics, it shows that when it comes to Rwandese in the Congo, Rwanda did not choose and continue not to choose who came before the genocide or after the genocide. When the people were massacred, even the tribes of the Congo became the victim. So they do not choose. So you find yourself, you are being mixed into this conflict time to time. As for Congolese government, you have the job to win the conflict in your country. You cannot let this continue for many, many years. You can take measure that can control your borders, put every resources you have so that you end this war. I'm sure when you end the wars and conflict, you will be in a better position to work, to do whatever you want to do in your country. Even if you have to talk with those of Kinyarwanda in the Congo, it will be easy to do that. You will be able to involve others as well to assist, but you have to take charge because this conflict have gone on for so long. Congolese people have suffered for too long. They have been bullied. I see comments on social media often how neighboring countries talk about the Congo negatively, because the story they have come to know is always the Congolese who are in conflict, who are in a war. It has shut the happy side of the Congolese, the musician, the music, the footballers, the large country, the country that is open for everyone to come in. So this idea of Banyamulenge, like I said, is not the issue of this matter. And if I can remind you, like I said earlier, can you imagine Congolese working in the government of Rwanda, even become in a position where they can become, let's say, a deputy or a governor? People of Rwandese background have worked in almost every institution in the DRC. The data is there. Many Rwandese who are in different countries, they live there peacefully. They work in different jobs. Imagine going to Rwanda and found people of Zambian background working in Rwanda's government. Can you imagine that? So this issue of ethnicity for me in Rwanda, I feel like it's something that need to be looked at. Again, Rwandese people have to question in their conscience, they know this is not the solution of the problem. People don't live in peace because they love each other, but because we are human beings at one way or the other, we all have to live our lives in peace. So if you are only 2 or 3 ethnicities in your country and you cannot live in peace without the freedom of the citizen to express themselves as ordinary citizens, without people being forced to refuse their identities, and with all that, but President Paul Kagame is still able to condemn or to bully the Congo that has more than 300 tribes, including the outside. And another point I want to raise with those who say this is the issue. Remember what I mentioned to you, that the DRC share tribes with many countries. And I asked you earlier, why is it only Rwanda Or why is it only this group of Kinyarwanda speaking that's being discriminated or that can be seen as the problem? Why you don't hear that being a problem with the other countries where they share tribes? Do you think there's never issues between these groups? Perhaps not, perhaps yes. Have you heard Tanzania go to the DRC to defend the Babembe in the DRC? Or Zambia go in the DRC to defend the Bemba people in the DRC? So these people have lived in peace. There may be small problems because where two people are, there's always a bit of issues. And if you say that is a Congolese problem, then I would leave it alone. I will never defend myself against it. I would never support one particular group. It is easy. It's either you support the Rwandese and you go all the way. You are there to support those Rwandese. And I think if Paul Kagame says he's in the DRC to support those of Rwandese background, in that sense, you should never say that what is happening in Congo is a Congolese problem. Because as soon as you have taken a step to get involved, to support, to go after the FDLR, to invade the Congo twice, it already become your problem. You have already made it a Rwandese problem. But you still saying you are going in Congo because of those of Rwandese background are being discriminated. So is that not your problem? Or if you are sending your military, your soldiers to go after those who took a part in the genocide, the FDLR, for the last 30 years, how is that not your problem, Mr. President Kagame? If he knows, he accepts he has invaded Congo twice, how is the problem in DRC is not his problem? Or how is Rwanda not implicated into that problem? Because remember what I said, Congo has never invaded another country, including Rwanda. But I mentioned to you, Rwanda invaded the DRC twice, and that country is never the same. So if Paul Kagame choose have nothing to do with the DRC, you will leave those who are from Kinyarwanda language alone, or the so-called M23, wherever, and let the Congolese people or government do whatever they want to do with them. Particularly if you are not going to receive them, the contradictions comes all the time with the argument that President Paul Kagame make all the time with this issue of the DRC. 1 minute he's not in the DRC, the next minute he's there to support a particular group or is after FDLR. Another minute he doesn't even know whether his military or soldiers are in Congo. Who's being fooled here? Is it us, or it's becoming difficult to understand President Paul Kagame on this issue? I don't know whether this is part of his political way of manipulating things, or we don't know anymore. I've always cried for ordinary citizens who many of you buy into these things you hear politicians say sometimes or all the time. You might just sit there and shake your head. Gosh. If you are scared, that's okay. You don't have the energy to go and stand against these things. But in your heart, in your conscience, you cannot accept these things to continue manipulating you. And to do this, you prepare the future of tomorrow. On the Rwanda side, I can act that many Rwandese are living in the dark because there are so many questions there that they need to question clearly and answer without emotions. If you look at some of these things we said, you come to understand that many of them are being left to remain in the dark, being silenced, to not have a voice. There is a reason why that voice is taken away, because this voice is what allows people to share views, to protest, to prepare other leaders to come. But when you don't have that, you know there is a problem. And the future, that is where the darkness is. What is the future of Rwandese children and the grandchildren will be when Paul Kagame is gone? Remember what I said, Mobutu stayed in power for 32 years. He was a president who was scared by many leaders and many countries around the world or in Africa. Not just because he was a very powerful man, no, because he was supported, and according to the source, when they wanted to get rid of him, they were tired of him. They released him and he died like, I don't know what I can describe. He left the country in chaos. And that's how many people stay in power often end. You've seen the story of Bashar today. See how Muammar Gaddafi was killed. Many often being killed badly. The end is not often good. And always leave the country in a very bad situation. So you as a Rwandese person who care for your country, this should be bothering you every day wherever you are. If you're thinking about your children, your grandchildren, and grandchildren. Because all these issues with your ethnicity, with your neighbors, you cannot see fire burning in the house of your neighbor while you are celebrating, you laughing. Remember what I said, even if your father is bringing you food somewhere, is buying houses somewhere, and you know your father doesn't have the money to buy all these things. You know it. This money is coming from somewhere. Are you gonna continue to buy daddy, or you start questioning this thing? Open your mind. Brothers and sisters of Congo, you have to do the same to defend your country, to stand for your country wherever you are. Be patriots of your country because you have contributed to the problem. You have been so easy to be manipulated. There are many who do not care about the country. You see a lot of politicians in the DRC, and President Paul Kagame has pointed this out several times. But the truth, he knows who we deal with. Many of them are there just to be in power. They do not even support a government that is doing well. They are so used to that mafia, the time of Joseph Kabila, who opened the country for everybody to serve themselves. Those who in the country serve themselves. Accusation of many who stole millions and billions. If your country is running in the right way, there is a peace, you can continue to earn money. Not everybody want to be a politician or want to be in power. So you have to stand up. Stop crying. Stop crying to the international community or wherever. You have been in this mess for many years. If the international community really want to help you, how many countries do you think it has to take? How many meetings do you think it can take within the UN to end this nonsense? If really Rwanda is implicated, they will just tell Rwanda, you don't, get out. They will sanction Rwanda. If Rwanda continue, they will withdraw their aid. We've seen it with Russia and many other countries. So it's doable. It's not being done. People choose not to take that solution because the activity that happening in Congo is the profit for many organizations and countries which do not wish to get the minerals and other resources through what the president of Congo called as the big door, but wish to continue taking from the windows when they can serve themselves even in the country if they go and talk business to business. I've spoken about this similar thing in the other podcasts, but this is what these powerful individual country organizations do not want to do. They don't want to do business to business. They don't want these so-called small or not powerful countries to prosper. They want you to be where you can be supported, where you can beg for aid time to time with a lot of conditions behind it, while they sell you what is coming from your countries 10 times the price of what you sold to them in the first place. That's the idea. This is the reason why if you do not come together, the power for you to defend yourself will always be very minimal. So they have their own responsibility. The same way they failed with the Rwanda genocide is the same way they failed to protect you Congolese in what can be seen as the worst genocide, worse than the one of Rwanda. Because if we are talking about 15 million people, and these are those who can be identified, because many are in very poor areas who are not known how they are killed. Even that estimation is just an estimation. So they continue to fail you Congolese, but you cannot continue also to accept this. You have to stand on your feet to fight for your country. Speak about your country wherever you are, loud and strong. Stand firm. Every citizen of countries does this. You can't be playing around one side to the other. If somebody's your enemy, is coming to rape your mother, is coming to kill your father, is coming to kill your children, you have to deal with them as enemy. Terrorists are terrorists no matter what. Even if your father is a terrorist. And on the countries that are developed, there's never this lawsuit that you Congolese are so into. You want to change something in your country, it becomes a story of media everywhere. When many countries sleep and wake up, they change whatever they want to change, whether it's a constitution, whether it's something else. In the name of democracy, yes, you are Democratic Republic of Congo, but you have not known a democracy. And nobody see you as a democratic country. You are new into this. You have to take one step at time. First, you have to control your country. And for brothers in the region, yes, you may have laughed to the Congolese, but this story have shifted time to time. You have to know today is Congo, tomorrow it could be your country. Because as the life continue to get worse, you don't know where we are going. You can never call yourself an African and be proud to love Africa when you know your neighboring countries is on fire. where you know the problem is coming from. You never even open your mouth to say anything. You even have the audacity to laugh and bully your neighbors. When you know well, the country the size of the DRC with the mineral resources it has, with its location, if it's doing well, almost the entire Central, East, West Africa can prosper. And that's what some do not want you to see or understand. Africans, you are letting these countries down. You can call yourself a developed country, you can develop as much as you like, but just like Kwame Nkrumah said, without the freedom, the prosperity of the other countries in Africa, you continue to be seen as a shame on many levels. I'm not saying there will never be a problem or every country in Africa will be better or will not have a problem. But by looking at that way, you have the capacity to even deal with your problems yourselves within the country and on a continent level. It's a change of mind, a change of way of thinking and seeing things. If you see another country attacking the other country, things should be said and decisions should be taken. Africa Union not being seen as an institution that can tackle these matters. And this is because behind Africa Union, there is power that sponsor, that supports this institution. Because the Africa Union, as you see, the critics and data out there, African countries are not able to take this institution well. When there is a conflict, they cannot even resolve many conflicts within the continent. And one of the reasons is because many of these leaders are themselves dictators, are themselves staying in power for too long, are themselves no good example. But some of these, you see them make speech every day, educating others. As for the international community, you know your responsibility. We cannot educate you. You know better on this subject or this type of subject. Ordinary citizen, you cannot enjoy your laptops and your phones and plane and all that, but forget to care about these issues between the DRC and Rwanda. You have the responsibility to stand up and do something, because a lot of mineral resources that is coming to save you, the laptop you are swapping around, the phones you are changing one to the other, you are enjoying, is the blood of millions of people being killed day in, day out in the DRC. Children being used as soldiers and women and men being raped more than 20 times every day. As for President P.O.L, Kagame, of course, the man himself, there's nothing that lasts forever. My word is that a great leader, a good father, is the one who thinks about the future of his great children. I know this is not how many black people, African, think. They think about their time, save themselves, that's it, and they leave the problem behind. Yes, you might think, okay, when I'm gone, my child is gonna come. Perhaps your child may not have a chance to take the power. And if he does, like the Alimbongo, there is a time for everything. The history, they say, is often judge us. What is happening today within these two countries has happened many times. So it's not too late. And I can see things are changing. The world is changing. The arrival even of Donald Trump will change things as well. A politics idea that worked in 1960, it's not going to work in 1970, 2020, 2025, 2030. All these movements are becoming clear. Politics is becoming so easy to see what is happening. Politicians, what they were used to be known as, very smart people. But many of them, if you look at things they are doing or saying today, you can question and think, wow, even me, I can be a president. Even me, I can be a minister. President P.O.L, you are losing it. And you can see that. Even other people can see it. The P.O.L Kagame we used to know, the man who used to stand up everywhere where he goes, we speak loud and this and that. It's not the P.O.L Kagame we see today. We see the speech change, the body language has changed. Recently, there have been speech where President P.O.L Kagame is insulting other leaders, calling them stupid, questioning how other president, like the one in the DRC, he was not voted when P.O.L Kagame has been in power for 4 terms. And with all this information, all these the bad things I have mentioned within this topic, are you in the position to educate others here? And for those who said P.O.L Kagame is a Pan-Africanist, is this how you define a Pan-Africanist? Who wake up every day knowing his neighbor's country is on fire and he has not provided any support? The only assistance that P.O.L Kagame and the Rwanda of P.O.L Kagame has done in terms of helping the DRC has been all these terrible things that I have mentioned that has happened to the Congo. the killing of every day, the raping, the displacement of the people in the DRC, week in, week out, raised here. So come on, with the level of education you have been educated, is that how you come to call somebody a great leader? He's a wonderful leader, or this person is a wonderful teacher? Africans, we have to change. Don't be fans. You have to be people who question, people of integrity. Be honest to yourself. Don't just cheer just because you like somebody or you support something. Then you should fool yourself to the position where you can't even see anything else that is wrong. You can do better than that. We can all be the solution for the DRC and the Rwanda, for the Congolese and the Rwandese people, because these two nations will never go anywhere. Even after 50 years, these two nations will be neighbors. There will be a time where they will find peace to live side by side. So this is not something that these two countries or other countries you see around will escape from. And this is how we have to think, or this is how we can change ourselves individually, our region, our communities, our countries, our continent, and our world. So I hope that you learned something today, and I hope you are not going to use your emotions. Like I said, sometimes even if you show somebody the truth with evidence, if they are fools, they will refuse to see that, to the point where you will find some people might comment negative comment. I welcome them, as we are not here to say what you enjoy, but we speak facts, we speak common sense. We're a platform that aims to educate or help to transform the way you think or how you see things. So we know that anyone who has a brain that functions well will be able to agree and praise what we say here, because we don't lean on one particular side. We speak to change the world. We want to be part of making a world a better place. So if you learn something, I'm sure I will see you back, because there's more podcasts to come. So make sure you join our social networks: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Just write Andunda Tree. Our email is info@andundatree.com. Our website is www.andundatree.com, or just type andundatree.com. Until next time, one love.